This is 20 Minutes Live. Welcome to all of you from India and around the world. I am Ninad Karpe, partner at 100x.vc. Today I'm truly delighted to welcome Ravi Singh to our 20 Minutes Live. Ravi Singh has been the Secretary General and Chief Executive Officer of World Wildlife Fund for Nature, WWF India, since 2003. Prior to his present responsibility, he worked with two international banks before moving to pursue his larger cause of conservation. His abiding interest in the conservation of nature led to his association with several conservation organizations like WWF and Bombay Natural History Society. As head of WWF India, he contributes to conserve biodiversity and further sustainability. A keen sportsman, a trekker, a traveler, a historian and reader, his varied interests and hobbies are linked with his core interest in nature and conservation. Welcome to the show, Ravi. Our format is simple, unique, and crisp. For the first 10 minutes, I will ask Ravi a couple of questions, which I'm very keen to ask. And then after that, you have a chance, all of you viewers, to ask him questions for the balanced 10 minutes. But don't wait. Whatever questions you have in mind, whatever you want to ask Ravi, this is your big chance, big moment. Put it in the comment box on the column on your screen, and I'll take it up after my first round of couple of questions, which I'm really keen to ask Ravi. So again, welcome to the show, Ravi, and thank you. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much.
Ravi, we have had SARS, then Ebola, and now COVID. Will this COVID-19 crisis force a change? Are you hopeful and optimistic that we will not face a zoonotic pandemic again? What is your view?
Well, the steady stream of knowledge that's coming through now seems to point out that increasingly zoonotic diseases and new or novel diseases like COVID are directly led by exploitation of living systems, wildlife, domestic animals, and issues like change in land use and agriculture. As we go forward, we are putting different values to this kind of economic exploitation, and the effects of it in the last few years have been devastating. I have here figures of swine flu, Ebola, COVID, SARS, MERS, even HIV to some extent. And all these are, the scale is sort of rising at a different level altogether. And lurking in this entire thing is the fact that a virus that was supposed to have been circulating amongst bats for quite some time, or seemed to be reasonably harmless, has now morphed to affect more than almost 3 million people now. And it has, because of global air travel and connectivity, caused a huge amount of human suffering to societies across the world and economic damage and so on and so forth. So we really, the needle of direction seems to be pointing that we may be expecting more of such cases in the world, and that we need to really change the way we are thinking, the way we are organized, and we need to transform, although it's a very difficult word to really effect, we need to transform the way we are living today. So that is, in a way, an answer to your question. We have very, very far to go to make this change.
So just again, yeah, go ahead, Ravi.
And that there are various aspects to it, and we can come to it later in the discussion. Sure. Please go ahead.
Sure. So, when you said about this change, where does it have to start? At the political level, at the individual level, societal level, at school levels, cultural?
In some cases, we do not have the luxury of time, I think. Okay. And we need to step up from this word called awareness into actual knowledge, and using that knowledge for conversion into policy and direction. If we can, once we bring the present crisis under control, maybe we use globally some direction for at least, or a time that comes less than a year, to take directional changes to change certain things, like the constant exploitation of agricultural lands, the change of land use, and these aspects cannot continue the way they are continuing today. The exploitation of wildlife, the constant use of domestic animals for purposes of, different areas of economic activity, these are backfiring on us today. So a lot of these things we have to change at a time when we are faced with complexities such as climate change and economic disruption. The next hopefully does not happen before we are really prepared. But I think we need to do much more than where we are today. For instance, using a figure like investing possibly up to 2 to 4% into India's GDP into the health infrastructure.
Right.
Just think of that aspect, from wherever it is right now, below 0.5. So these could be some of the ways to think about it. But in the natural world, in the world of environment and conservation, wildlife, we see this as we've been monitoring it over the last 60 years, and the direction has been downward. The scales have been downward, and this scale needs to now start flattening out and changing upwards. I mean, that's as brief as I can.
Sure. So you spoke about wildlife and crisis. So my next question is, so we are faced with this massive crisis. Everyone's attention is only focused on health, personal health, community health, societal health. How would you highlight the importance of wildlife in a time like this?
Wildlife requires, certain things. For countries like India, we understand that is necessary to us. I mean, for India, it's embedded in our culture, in our heritage, in our historical tradition. We also require needs its space and for its own existence. Sometimes that's difficult in our crowded country. It's very difficult to segregate areas because of various obvious reasons. Where we have people living, we have communities living with wildlife, or where we have areas set aside for wildlife, these should be protected with a kind of a much bigger view of using this great tradition of India in the way this is managed or the way this goes forward. Certain places which are specific to the procreation of wildlife, because India thinks it's important, it's part of our constitution, it's part of our well-being, these should be managed better. They are managed well, but I think we need to go a few stages up, which is for our country maybe not that difficult. But in other areas, the provision of corridors, the ability to set aside certain areas for water management systems, for better clean rivers, for areas for our oceans and marine wildlife to recover, places in the Himalayas where they need to have freedom from exploitation and things like that. So these are things that are important, because to give them space to have health in your natural ecosystems is actually a benefit for us, because we will benefit through better air, better water, and things like that. You yourself know we've had photographs in India showing the Dhauladhar range from Jalandhar, or the Gangotri from Saharanpur, and from Bihar, the Himalayas in Nepal. Now these are showing us what nature can do if you follow a certain lifestyle, not by dampening your economic activity, but improving your own health system by changing your habit. So these habit changes, these changes of the way we are, these are essential for us to adopt for the next whatever period of time we decide to do, maybe 20, 25 years as a start.
Sure. So I'll quickly move on to biodiversity, a topic very close to your heart. So we are facing a rapid climate change crisis and biodiversity loss. Is this a challenge which we cannot surmount? Is there hope, in simple words?
See, I think this is well known. This is a challenge which is, tremendous for mankind. There's one big problem with the challenge, and that is it requires a global recovery. and its local recoveries, local protections are important for people to understand, but ultimately this requires a global change and global transformation in this entire process, which is the most difficult part. So we continue to perhaps go from one crisis to the other, one extreme system to the other, one whole season of cyclones which we cannot explain with past knowledge and so on and so forth. But very importantly, this knowledge that we have, we must understand how the earth works. We have, I'll give you two examples, and this comes from birds. This famous species of birds called the domestic sparrow.
Right.
And we think it's domestic and it's in this area. Bombay Natural History Society studies have shown sparrows, which are ringed for purposes of seeing where they go to, have been found, released from Delhi, have been found in Kazakhstan, have been found in Kyrgyzstan. One particular sparrow from Point Calimere in southern India, on the tip of southern India, was found somewhere near Bangladesh.
Wow.
Now, these species, I mean, there is a web of life. The Amur falcon starts up from the Amur, crosses India, and goes into areas of Tanzania and South Africa, and all the way back.
Right.
Now, these currents of life, I mean, black kites, the paria kites, so-called paria kites, are also showing us all these things. And many things are like this are connected. Now, what do they do? What do they require? They require a good system, a natural safety system where they go from, and a good system where they land. And in that, are they carrying pathogens? Yes, they could be. They could very well be carrying pathogens from Delhi all the way to the Arctic Circle. Or also good molecules which can improve the way we are in the world. So I think a lot of these things, to understand this, to have better knowledge, to know that we are interconnected, and that climate change is going to affect all of us, starting with maybe the species in the sub-montane areas of the Himalaya and the coastal communities that are there in India. Now, once we have this knowledge, we can undertake certain steps, which I think we are very close to. There are changes that may come in the next 5 to 10 years. I know it sounds a long time, which we did not see in the last 60 years or so. So mankind is developing towards that. I mean, the Millennium Development Goal talked about environment and natural systems.
Right.
The SDGs have taken it even further. The new, we seem to be coming to a new deal for nature and people, which in 2020 might be a way that mankind changes itself, the way it looks at the earth, and so on and so forth. So these concerns are that we are making a change. But I think we need far more knowledge, especially for these people who devise policy and take executive action, that this or that may not be the right way to go forward, or this or that will be the right way to go forward.
So I have some questions already from viewers, and I will ask some of them, hopefully a little crisp in your response, so I can take some more responses. Mudit Jain is asking a very, very direct question. How come tribals are not affected by this COVID-19? Is it because we are eating meat which is factory farmed, or what is the issue? Is that true, or is it what he's saying?
I don't really know. I don't really know. I don't think it's specific to any community, but generally whatever information that I have from the areas, from forest fringe areas and others so far, has been that the kind of virulence that we see in the urban settlements does not prevail there. But specifically for tribal communities, I don't really know.
Okay. One question has come up is how do you get young minds? That's the starting point for the next generation to be more aware and how to carry this. How do you carry this message to young minds?
I think by two methods. One is that young people need to go out and explore their country and their area. They need to step out, maybe 50 kilometers from where they live, 100 kilometers, and go and see for themselves this interaction of nature and people, or agriculture and water, or even forest systems, or the flow of nature and the web of life, and so on and so forth. It's not very difficult today. There's transportation available. You could go there. But at the same time, keep your minds open, be assimilative to what's happening in the rural part of rural sectors of India, rural areas of India, and try and relate to the people and understand what they're doing. So this is one part. Go out, explore your country.
Sure.
Number two, you have access today of a kind that we did not have, my generation did not have.
True.
Internet, to EDU sites, to scientific papers. Make a grouping of what you need to know. Maybe if it's a few pillars that you may want to know. And then within those pillars of your inquiry, try and learn as much as you can. Try and understand. This is the greatest thing that you could be able to do, because here in both these ways, to look externally and to increase your mind, you would be investing in yourselves to be able to face the future and to maybe design, influence the future.
No, that's great. You have given some specific tasks and responses. So I have a question from a viewer, Vijay, and I would request viewers to please, if you have any questions, please ask. We are going to, this is your chance to ask Ravi any question. Vijay is asking, what are the fresh challenges faced by wildlife conservation efforts in the face of COVID-19?
Well, two or three things. Number one, a report that we recently did shows purely from newspaper reports and clippings and data coming from there. Poaching of small animals in peripheral areas of the country has gone up almost up 5 times to what it was reported earlier.
Oh, really?
Now, it may not be prevalent everywhere in the country. It may not be there in your area or areas that you know. But generally, just looking at the newspaper reports, this is the kind of response we're getting. At the same time, it doesn't mean that it's happening in areas which are well protected or communities are protecting it well. In those places, obviously not. And where the forest department has its, remit, probably, this is not coming to our information and to that extent. And therefore, it's more in the areas that are, people are not able to travel to or go to. Number one. Number two, the interaction of teams and the interactions of people who are in certain areas, say border interactions, trans-border interactions within India and Nepal, say, or Bhutan, or between states. That exchange has come down to quite an extent, and this is very important for constant, good management. Yeah. And the third thing I think is that, the normal, people are not able to go out. People are not able to go as tourists into wildlife areas and sanctuaries and travel. So some of that, people are feeling upset that we're not able to do this. At the same time, that kind of connect and that sort of understanding what could be happening, what, where could people help, etc. That's not happening at this time. So these three things that we see direct.
So, you partially answered it, but Nikhil Bhatia, who's a very, fond of nature, he's asked a question. Is the current lockdown affecting wildlife sanctuaries' existence due to lack of tourists? Or is this a blessing in disguise for wildlife?
Really, it's neither in that sense. It's too soon. And the wildlife sanctuaries which people go to in India, there are few. The high visitation areas in every state are 3, maybe 5 in some cases, maybe less, So they're not necessarily entirely representative of this, and we need much more time to be able to analyze its difference. Initially, it may seem so because, you're not getting evidence and you're not getting the right results. But generally, to say that it is better that people are not going there, I don't think that is a factor that comes up at this point of time. And wildlife is very curious, very, it goes and seeks out changes, looks for people when they were there and they're not there anymore. You've had enough photographs of wildlife wandering through various parts of India. But at the same time, a certain amount of visitation is important.
It's good. Okay.
Tourism, and that could be beneficial for conservation as
well. Okay. So there's a question from Subha Bangera. He's really a wildlife enthusiast and he loves it. So he's asking, how can we bring NHAI National Highway Authority, to learn wildlife to build highways to suit wildlife to move more freely across
Yeah.
rather than coming in their way.
So there is a protocol that has been developed by Wildlife Institute of India and with the NHAI, and the NHAI has tabled it internally to say that whatever we do now, we should take into account these aspects of corridors, water flows, water channels, landscapes, and all that in the plan before we go out and make the project, because retrofitting costs money and changes and litigation takes a long time.
Sure.
So I'm not a spokesman for NHAI, but this I have seen the change in the last 4 years between where it was and where it is going.
Okay,
Will
that's
it
good
all
to
happen in every way? I can't say, but certainly the changes are encouraging.
Okay. I'll take last one or two questions. Mudit again has asked, how can we have an economic model whereby we preserve wildlife also, we have tourism also, and the entire ecosystem works well? How do you find a balance? Is there a balance in India or there's no?
I think India has more of a balance than many other parts of the world. This is why for a crowded country like ours, we can still see wildlife, go to a specific area, look for a species and see it. That is why we have such a variety of birds that are available to us at our windows and our balconies and our local areas and so on and so forth. We just need to have two things. One is what we have as system, we must understand it. We must think that this system has been evolved in India for some time, and we must understand that system the way it works. And number two, we should help this system to work, and we should have confidence in its ability to do better. I think that's very important. I mean, lots of times I know we are not satisfied by the way we are. Indians tend to be overcritical.
Sure.
But I have seen this across the world. People have a lot of respect in international for the way we, not just the way we have our laws and the fact that we criticize them for lack of implementation, but whatever we have is far better than what we have seen in other parts of the world. So there is a possibility that India can have its own solution.
So I'll take this question from a teacher, Fiza. She's asking, what are some of the virtual platforms which you can recommend to engage students and young people with wildlife and conservation efforts within our country? So virtual platforms,
yeah. So there are a number of platforms. If Fiza could contact me or my organization directly, we'll be happy. So both in the formal school system, as well with different organizations across India, very good systems. Reaching out to different areas of the country, different languages, methodologies. My own organization has been working now 50 years in the service of India. All the time we've had an impact, or we've had programs going for education. So happy to do that. There are plenty of it available, and some of it by the finest minds and pedagogues that in this particular sector.
Sure. Great. Let me wind down by asking a final question. This will be behind us. It might take some time, the present health crisis. It might take 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. But after that, are you more hopeful in your efforts? Do you think attitudes will change towards conservation, environment, wildlife, biodiversity, or it will remain the same? What is, let's say 1 year down the line, everything is behind us. What do you think? How do you think you feel?
Yeah, I wish it could be that. The practical aspects are much more difficult. I think in the cycle of economic recovery, we will probably lose the blue skies over us, and the pollution will come back into our areas and the garbage lots and so on and so forth. We will lose the sight of the Himalayas from the plains and all that. I don't think that it's going to sustain, but perhaps in that cycle, when we go back and recall and rethink and say, is this really necessary? Is constant irresponsible consumption necessary? Can we be responsible in terms of our consumption areas? Can we give some space, not just in terms of space on land and sea, but also space in our hearts to other creatures and other areas and policies that perhaps could succeed more than what we think is happening now? So the second part, really, it's not stage 2. It is probably going to be stage 2A or stage 2B. sometime ahead, and perhaps more enlightened leadership in this area will be able to help us. Scientific leadership. And I think we here is the part. Seen responsibly in this aspect, India can actually lead, because we have the knowledge, we have the ground, the compound to play with this. We've had our theories, and we know some of the ways forward, and we are, we can find the way forward to do this in a proper way. So optimistically, slightly long-winded answer, but the answer is yes.
Okay, yes, it is. I want you to give a real last word, last message to all our young viewers. We do get a lot of young viewers, because of the nature of industry I am in. We get a lot of startup founders, students who watch this show. Do you want to give one message, and after that, we'll wind down the show?
My one message to all of you. I know it's difficult now, but go out. Go out, explore. Explore your country. Understand it. Even if you have to go for a school trip together with your teachers. Perhaps some of you may want to go for a hike or a trek or a camp. Go out, understand this. Go to a wildlife sanctuary, and see it for yourself. Not just the, big mammals, the tiger, which everybody would like to see, and so on and so forth, but also the dynamics with which it happens. There is no substitute to this. Go and see your historical sites, your archaeological sites. Go and see the vast vistas of, of the landscapes of India. See the Himalayas. Try and understand. There is no country like India.
Right.
There is no country like India. Yet, put it in yourself, and your answers will come from there.
Wow, what an amazing closing statement. Very good. There's no country like India. Put it in yourself and experience. That was amazing. I will not let you go without asking a last personal question. I mean, this 3 months of lockdown, I know you're a voracious reader, but is there one or two books which you would like to recommend to our viewers, which you have read?
I've got a book right here I'd like to show you.
Sure.
This, I know it's coming the other way around. This is Pranay Lal's Indica.
Right.
And this is the comprehensive natural history of the Indian subcontinent based on geological evidences and changes that have happened over millennia. It's one of the finest books that I have read. And it's not the first time I'm reading it. This is the third time I'm going through it.
Oh, wow.
Because the amount of knowledge it gives you about your country, its evolution, where it happened, and where perhaps we can think of going, because they start from the journey of the continent breaking away from the landmass 68 million years ago. The longest journey of a subcontinent that the earth has ever seen. And this is why I always say many aspects about it, but this Jambu Dweep, this old name for it, comes from there.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Ravi, for coming to 20 Minutes Live. We are really delighted you could come and spread this message. I was very keen that you come and spread your message to our viewers. It all adds up. At the end, it all adds up. And thank you, viewers, for joining us on this Thursday. Remember, every Thursday, 20 Minutes Live is at 5 p.m. Sorry, 5 a.m. I'm saying. The talk was so good. So thank you, Ravi. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.